Rumblefish by S.E. Hinton. Day 5. What does a dumb party have to do with anything? I heard all about you and that girl, that black-haired tramp. She was so mad she couldn't even speak for a second. Just get lost, she said finally. Her eyes were shooting sparks. I don't want to ever see your face again. Don't worry, you won't have to, I told her, and added a few comments of my own. I almost slapped her. Then, when she went stalking down the street, her hair bouncing on her shoulders, her head up, a tough, sweet little chick, I thought how I wouldn't be going over to her house to watch TV anymore. We wouldn't hug close, trying to make out without her little brothers catching us. I wouldn't have her to hold anymore, soft but strong in my arms. I couldn't see what messing around with the chick at the lake had to do with me and Patty. It didn't have anything to do with me and Patty. Why would she let something stupid like that louse us up? I felt funny. My throat was tight, and I couldn't breathe real good. I wondered if I was going to cry. I couldn't remember how crying felt, so I couldn't tell. I was all right in a little bit, though. I just walked around for a while. I couldn't think of anything to do, or any place to go. I spotted the motorcycle boy in the drugstore reading a magazine, so I went in. Got a cigarette? I asked. He handed me one. Let's do something tonight, okay? I said. Let's go over to the Strip across the bridge, okay? All right, he said. Maybe I can get Steve to go too. I wanted Steve to go in case the motorcycle boy forgot I was with him and took off on a cycle or went in a bar where I couldn't go. All right. I stood there and looked at the magazines for a little bit. Hey, I said, what you reading? There's a picture of me in this magazine. He showed it to me. It was a picture of him, all right. He was leaning back against a beat-up cycle, kind of propped up on his hands. He was wearing blue jeans and a blue jean jacket and no shirt. He and the motorcycle were against a bunch of trees and vines and grass. It made him look like a wild animal out of the woods. It was a good picture, a photograph that looked like a painting. He wasn't smiling, but he looked happy. Hey, I said, what magazine is this? I looked at the cover. It was one of those big national magazines, one that went all over the country. Is there anything about you in here? I looked through the magazine. No, the photograph is one of a collection by a famous photographer. She took my picture out in California. I'd forgotten it. Actually, it was one heck of a shock to open a magazine and find my picture in it. I looked at the other photographs. They were mostly of people. They all looked like paintings. The magazine said that the person who took them was famous for her photos looking like paintings. Wow, I said. Wait till I tell everybody. Don't, Rusty James. I'd rather you didn't tell anybody. God knows it's going to get around soon enough. He had been acting a little weird ever since he got back. He had a funny look on his face now, so I said, sure. It's a bit of a burden to be Robin Hood, Jesse James, and the Pied Piper. I'd just as soon stay a neighborhood novelty, if it's all the same to you. It's not that I couldn't handle a larger scale. I just plain don't want to. All right, I said. I knew what he meant about being Jesse James to some people. The motorcycle boy was very famous around our part of the city. Even the people who hated him would admit that. Hey, I get it, I said. The Pied Piper, man. Those guys would have followed you anywhere. Heck, most of them still would. It would be great, he said, if I could think of somewhere to go. As we were leaving the drugstore, I saw the cop Patterson across the street, watching us. I stared back at him. The motorcycle boy, as usual, didn't even see him. That is really a good picture of you, I said. Yes, it is. He was smiling, but not happy. He never smiled much. It scared me when he did. Chapter 7. We went downtown that night, across the bridge to where the lights were. It wasn't as hard to talk Steve into going along as I thought it'd be. Usually I had to hound him and stop just short of threatening him to get him to do anything his parents wouldn't like. This time, though, he just said, okay, I'll tell my father I'm going to the movies, which was the easiest I've ever had talking him into something. Steve had been acting peculiar lately. Ever since his mother went into the hospital, he'd had a funny kind of empty recklessness to him. He looked like a sincere rabbit about to take on a pack of wolves. He met us at our place. I never went to his house. His parents didn't even know he knew me. I poured half a bottle of cherry vodka into a bottle of Sneaky Pete to take with us. Here, take a swig of this, I said to Steve as we went across the bridge. There wasn't much space for walking. We were supposed to drive across. We stopped in the middle so the motorcycle boy could look at the river a while. He'd been doing that ever since I can remember. He really liked that old river. I handed Steve the bottle, and to my surprise, he took a drink. He never drank. I've been trying to get him to for years, and had just about given up on it. He gagged, looked at me for a second, then swallowed it. He wiped his eyes. That stuff tastes awful, he told me. Don't worry about the taste, I said. It'll get you there. Remind me to chew gum before I go home, okay? Sure, I said. The motorcycle boy was ready to move on again, and we trotted along behind him. He covered a lot of ground with one stride. It was going to be a good night. I could tell. The motorcycle boy was basically a night person. He'd come home in the morning and sleep past 1 or 2 and really just be getting awake good around 4. He was hearing pretty good, too, and didn't seem to mind us going with him. He didn't used to like me following him around. Now it seemed like he barely noticed we were there. Why do you drink so much? Steve asked me. Something was bugging him. He always was kind of nervous and bothered, but I couldn't believe he'd ever tried to pick a fight with me. You can't stand your father drinking all the time, he went on doggedly. So why do you? Do you want to end up like that? I don't drink that much, I said. I was over into the city, on the strip, where there were lots of people, and noise and lights, and you could feel energy coming off things, even buildings. I was danged if Steve was going to mess it up for me. Man, this is going to be a good night, I said, to change the subject. I love it over here. I wish we lived over here. I swung myself around a light pole and almost kicked Steve into the street. Calm down, he muttered. He took another swallow from the bottle. I figured that would cheer him up some. Hey, he said to the motorcycle boy, you want a drink? You know he don't drink, I said, just sometimes. That makes a heck of a lot of sense. Why don't you? Steve asked. The motorcycle boy said, I like control. Steve never talked to the motorcycle boy. That wine had really made him brave. Everything over here is so cool, I went on. The lights, I mean. I hate it on our block. There ain't any colors. Hey, I said to the motorcycle boy, you can't see the colors, can you? What's it look like to you? He looked at me with an effort, like he was trying to remember who I was. Black and white TV, I guess, he said finally. That's it. I remembered the glare the TV gave off at Patty's house. Then I tried to get rid of the thought of Patty. That's too bad. I thought colorblind people just couldn't see red or green. I read somewhere they couldn't see red or green or brown or something, Steve said. I read that. So did I, the motorcycle boy answered. But we can't be everything we read. It don't bother him none, I told Steve, except when he's cycle riding. He tends to go through red lights. Sometimes, said the motorcycle boy, surprising me since he didn't usually start conversations. It seems to me like I can remember colors, way back when I was a little kid. That was a long time ago. I stopped being a little kid when I was 5. Yeah, I thought this was interesting. I wonder when I'm going to stop being a little kid. He looked at me with that look he gave to almost everybody else. Not ever. I really thought that was funny. And I laughed, but Steve glared at him. A rabbit scowling at a panther. What's that supposed to be? A prophecy or a curse? The motorcycle boy didn't hear him, and I was glad. I didn't want Steve to get his teeth knocked out. Hey, I said, let's go to a movie. There were some good ones right there on the strip. We were passing the advertising posters. That sounds like a great idea, Steve said. Let me have the bottle. I handed it to him. He was getting happier every time he took a drink. Too bad, he said. You have to be 18 to get into this movie. That is too bad. Since it really looks interesting, he was studying some of the scenes they had on the advertising posters. The motorcycle boy went to the ticket seller and bought 3 tickets, came back and handed us each one. Steve stared at him, open-mouthed. Well, said the motorcycle boy, let's go. He walked right in. Was that guy blind or something? Steve said loudly. In the movie house, dark, I could hear people turn around to look at us. Shut up, I told him. I had to wait so my eyes could get used to the dark. It didn't take long. The motorcycle boy had already found us seats right in the middle. I got in here before, I told Steve, and the place was rated. That was a blast. You should have seen the movie they were playing that night. It was something else. I was going on to tell him about the movie, but he interrupted me with, raided? Police raid? He was quiet for a little while, then said, Rusty James, if you're arrested or something, can you refuse bail? I mean, can't you stay in jail if you'd rather do that than go home? What are you talking about? If my father had to come to the jailhouse and get me, I'd rather stay there. I mean it. I'd rather stay in jail. I'll relax, I said. Nothing is going to happen. I lit up a cigarette and put my feet up on the back of the chair in front of me. Could I help it if somebody was sitting there? The person in the seat turned around and gave me a dirty look. I looked back at him like there was nothing I'd rather do than bash his face in. He moved over 2 seats. That was pretty good, said the motorcycle boy. Did you ever think of trying out for a chameleon? I don't know them, I said, kind of proud of myself. What's their turf? For a minute I heard Steve trying to smother his laughter. Heck, I could hear both of them laughing, but the movie got started, so I didn't pay any attention. The very beginning of the movie was just some people talking. I figured it wouldn't be too long before we got to the good stuff, and it wasn't. But by that time, Steve wasn't looking at the screen anymore. See, the motorcycle boy never watched movies. He watched the people in the audience. I'd been to movies before with him, so it didn't bother me. But now Steve was looking at the people, too, to see what was so interesting. There wasn't anything interesting, just some old men, some college kids, some people who had drifted in and off the streets, and what looked like some rich kids from the suburbs slumming. It was the usual people. I knew that was one of the motorcycle boy's weird habits, but I hated for Steve to miss parts of the movie, especially since I was sure he hadn't been to a skin flick before. So I poked him in the ribs and said, "You're missing out on something, kid." When he looked at the screen, he froze. It was my turn to laugh. "Are they faking that?" he asked in a strangled voice. "I doubt it," I said. "Would you?" "You mean," his voice rose slightly, "that people film that? Nah, this is live from Madison Square Garden. Sure they film it." He sat there for a few minutes more, then jumped up hurriedly. "I gotta go to the John," he said. "I'll be right back." "Steve," I hollered at him, but he was gone. After about 10 minutes, I knew he wasn't coming back. "Come on," I said to the motorcycle boy. Outside it was almost as dark as in the movie house, until you got used to the colored lights. I found Steve plastered up against the wall, sick look on his face. "Well," I said, "what happened?" "Nothing. I don't know. A guy just asked me if I liked the movie. What's scary about that?" It was like he was talking to himself. "I was going to tell you. I took the wine bottle out of my black leather jacket. You never go to the John in those places. I mean, never." Steve gave me a startled look. So it was scary. I just didn't make it up. I mean, is there really something to be scared of? "Yep," I said. Steve looked like he was going to throw up. I thought another drink might help him. It did seem to perk him up some. "I didn't mean to make you guys miss the movie," he said. "We ain't missing nothing. I seen better." We went down the block. The motorcycle boy turned to walk backwards a few steps. "Sin City," he read the theater marquee cheerfully. "Adults only." He went bopping on down the street. The street was jammed with cruising cars. You could hear music blasting out of almost every bar. There were lots of people. Everything is so cool. I waved my cigarette at the noise. I couldn't explain how I felt, jivey, juiced up, just alive. The lights, I mean, and all the people. I tried to remember why I liked lots of people. I wonder, how come? Maybe because I don't like being by myself. I mean, man, I can't stand it. Makes me feel tight, like I'm being choked all over. Neither one of them said anything. I thought maybe they hadn't even heard me. But all of a sudden, Motorcycle Boy said, "When you were 2 years old, and I was 6, Mother decided to leave. She took me with her. The old man went on a 3-day drunk when he found out. He's told me that was the first time he ever got drunk. I imagined he liked it. Anyway, he left you alone in the house for those 3 days. We didn't live where we do now. It was a very large house. She abandoned me eventually, and they took me back to the old man. He'd sobered up enough to go home. I suppose you developed your fear of being alone then." What was he saying? What he was saying didn't make any sense to me. Trying to understand it was like trying to see through fog. Sometimes, usually on the streets, he talked normal. Then sometimes he'd go on like he was reading out of a book, using words and sentences nobody ever used when they were just talking. I took a long swallow of wine. "You," I paused, then startled again. "You never told me that. I didn't think it would do any good to find out. You told me now." Something nagged at the back of my mind, like a memory. "So I have." He stopped to admire a cycle parked on the street. He looked it over very carefully. I stood there fidgeting on the sidewalk, zipping the zipper of my jacket up and down. That was a habit I had. I had never been afraid of the motorcycle boy. Everybody else was, even people who hated him, even people who said they weren't. But I had never been afraid of him till now. It was an odd feeling, being afraid of him.